Who should represent whom? The first rumbles in the fight over redistricting. Plus, how much the cost of a college education, where it's going up and where it's staying flat, and the push to end the extra $300 in unemployment money. That's what we're talking about right now on Kansas Week. I'm Pilar Pedraza, and this is Kansas Week. A group of Republican lawmakers is calling on Kansas Governor Laura Kelly to end the extra federal unemployment funds in the hopes it will help fill job openings. Cakesbury Smith spoke with business owners who think the extra money is to blame for the lack of applicants.
It's kind of, disheartening, to see this happen. Because, we're trying to stay open.
Most businesses across Wichita are back open and trying to recover from the pandemic, but some of them are still on limited hours and access because they just can't fill job positions.
There's been 2 or 3 Saturdays that I've had to close, just not have enough people to work. We get some applications, some of them show. Some of them work for a week and leave. Some of them don't show. It's been tough.
Pietro Defazio opened his Italian restaurant in 1982. He says he's never been so short-staffed.
Everything tasting good?
He's tried increasing wages and offering bonuses to employees, but he believes unemployment funding could be keeping people home.
I'm doing what I can. I wish the governor would, instead of giving more money to the unemployment, benefits, give people money to go back to work.
Local economist Jeremy Hill doesn't think an extra $300 a week is holding people back from re-entering the workforce. He says other factors like uncompetitive wages, lack of flexibility, and steady population decrease is more likely. Senator Jerry Moran wants to provide an incentive, a one-time payment to people who go back to work.
I would definitely fix some of the issues of those people who might be on what we call on the margin. That would get them off the margin, because why wouldn't you take a bonus and work at a job?
Governor Kelly says she sees conflicting data on the issue, but isn't rushing to end any funding.
I expect things to turn around probably towards August, September. It's going to be a struggle this summer, I've got a feeling.
In Wichita, Bree Smith, Cake News on your side.
And the Kansas Chamber of Commerce this week sent the governor a letter asking her to stop those extra payments. The letter included a list of over 180 businesses, some of whom said they didn't agree to be on the list, from the Lawrence Journal-World to Airbus America. So there's a lot there to discuss. Doing that this week, we have on the desk with me, yay, both of you on the desk, Representative Henry Helgerson, a Wichita Democrat, and Representative Stephen Johnson, a Republican from this area. Thank you both so much. And to start off, what are you guys hearing in your districts about this issue? Because it does seem to vary from place to place. Henry, why don't you start?
In Wichita, I've heard from several people. Some in the nursing home industry, some in the small business, food business especially, where they're having a hard time coming up with employees. And a few of them have heard the discussion that we should eliminate the $300 to encourage people to go back.
Mm-hmm. And similar. I've probably heard from about a dozen different business owners and employers, several other people as well, who did want to see it end. They were concerned that the incentives kept people from re-entering. Unemployment rate in our area is low. It's low across the state. That has made it challenging for them. And this is one of the things that they see that is there. I have heard from one person who laid out a very specific case that also said, we need that to continue. But if I look at the majority that I've heard from, it has been to look at the issues with finding enough workers.
And go ahead.
Now, there's been a lot of, my cousin here isn't going to go back to work until after the $300 is completely expired. And we hear from somebody else give their own personal account. But we don't have the facts. Unemployment here in Kansas today is now at 3.5%. I go with what Jeremy Hill said, that I don't think that there are really that many incentives to stop people from going. That $300 is important to some people, but it's not. But I want to throw it a little bit different way. We have, for the next, this pot of money that the $300 comes from is a separate type of federal funds. We can't use it to take and give incentives for people going back to work. It has to be used for this program only, and it has to be kept in place for at least 30 days. So we're only going to eliminate it for 2 months. If legislators, federal officials believe that what we should do is have a one-time payment, there are federal funds available that other states are going to use, haven't used it yet, but going to use to give incentives to get people back to work to help the small business. That might be a program that you put in with this. Mm-hmm. But I will underline that maybe Kansas needs to look at how we put together a program that raises the boat for everybody. We, provide a living wage, provide some kind of basic health care program for everyone. Make sure those kind of incentives are out there for the small business and for the medium businesses, so people will be encouraged to go back to work.
Okay, you brought up something interesting there, basic health care for everyone. Of course, the governor throughout the session has been pushing for Medicaid expansion. Just this last week, vetoed a bill that would have provided short-term insurance, and again, calling for Medicaid expansion. This short-term insurance bill, any chance on sine die next Wednesday that it's going to come up again for possible veto override? Stephen?
I don't think so. I haven't heard about that. It's something that we might hear about at the beginning of next week. But in terms of putting together enough folks to vote for an override, I don't know what our attendance will be on a sine die to be able to conduct those.
Yeah. And another issue that you kind of touched on, talking about Jeremy Hill's ideas as far as what the cause of all of this is. Bree didn't mention this in her story, but I know when I spoke with him on a similar story a couple weeks ago, he said one of the biggest issues is the cost of child care, and that's really keeping especially women out of the workforce. And that, if somehow we can find a way to lower that cost, and he mentioned specifically regulations on child care centers. And I know during the pandemic, there was a lot of state aid that went to child care centers to help them get through this. Any possibility of some sort of program like that continuing?
Well, child care is an issue across the state, and some communities have worked to be really creative in addressing it. I know Garden City has been working to try different things that are there. I'm not sure if regulation is an answer to that. I think we've got to continue to be as creative as we can to figure out how to meet that need better, because that is a holdup for so many families in being able to do it. Addressing regulation so that we can cut through it may even be important to look at where could a different way of providing that is quality child care that could be done quickly and efficiently would be a big plus for the state.
Henry?
Let me step back. Steve, first of all, Steve is one of the best legislators in Topeka, Democrat, Republican. We get up into Topeka, and too often we break down Democrats on one side, Republicans on another. And what we should be trying to do is put together a coalition with business, with labor, and say, how do we build a good labor force? And how do we help small business? How do we help the farmers? And what's necessary to do that? Child care is clearly part of it. Health care is clearly part of it. And maybe we have to reinvent the whole system. But it's necessary, if we're going to be competitive now and in the next 20 years, that we look at how we get more efficiency with the limited dollars that we have.
All right. Well, I'm going to wait for you guys to take up that crusade, and we're going to move on to our next topic. The state of Kansas is stepping up to help hundreds of your children's schools pay their utility bills this year after record high prices during the polar cold snap this last February. Waubonsee schools saw their natural gas bill jump from an average $4,300 to $53,000 this last February. Newton School's bill grew to 6 times its normal size for a total of $200,000. And the list continues. The schools all suffering from an unprecedented spike in natural gas costs during an 8-day period last February. The state legislature quickly passed a plan making $100 million available in low-interest loans to cities hit with these unexpected costs. To date, those cities have used about $80 million of that. Now, the remaining $20 million is becoming available to Kansas public schools and businesses in need of help. The loans come through local banks but are funded by the state. Schools and businesses can get as much as $500,000 to be paid back within 3 years. Meanwhile, some schools, like the Lawrence District, are considering lawsuits. And the Kansas Attorney General has opened an investigation into whether natural gas companies illegally price gouged customers during the winter storm. Yeah, and as we look at that, I know when I spoke with State Treasurer Lynn Rogers probably about a month ago now, he mentioned that this program was coming up, was going to be happening. But was this something that lawmakers envisioned when they first worked on this bill? I know it was passed unusually quickly, and I know you were kind of part of that, Stephen.
Well, everybody was a part of that, and it was passed quickly. It came up and went all the way through the process so that we could get relief immediately to cities who were pressed by that. And that was really important to get it done quickly. And it was a creative solution that many people stepped up to help. And so no, it was not part of the vision that I recall initially, as it really was responding to the municipalities and what they were facing. But as we got further through and it looked like there was additional capacity that had been allowed within the program, then the additional need of the schools was added.
Do you have any idea of just how much need from schools and businesses there may be across the state?
I don't think we do. We had passed the $100 million initially, and then when we had only used the $80 million for the loans initially, we looked at the additional amount that was there to offer some relief as different entities would be facing it. But you know, as we continue to find out what people are up against, I don't know if the State Finance Council will have any authority to do anything further, but hopefully at least helps meet some of the gaps.
Yeah.
One other thing that hasn't been brought up, and there is a tremendous need out there, but we need to look a little deeper, and that is, what were the contracts that the schools and the municipalities negotiated with the utilities? You know, why was this tremendous variation? Did they buy it on the cheap one time and then got stuck with the higher cost the other? And then those municipalities or school districts that had a stable plan that paid a little during the low times, were they able to weather it a little bit better? That's the kind of detailed information I'd like to have too.
It is some, and then the Attorney General is looking into that to see if there is indeed price gouging that was there. In some of the utility discussions, they felt that the price the market bore was what is going to wind it up being at the end, but that was a shocking difference in price for natural gas per unit from one day to the next.
Yeah, what about the state? Do you guys have any feel for how state agencies may have been impacted by this?
Some of the state hospitals had dramatic increases, and we took care of it in a few of the budgets, I know. And my guess is we may get some additional supplemental requests, you know, in this next year.
Yeah. Well, public school is not the only issue. We're also talking about colleges today. One bill that won't increase for most Kansas students, college tuition. Alec Gartner from the KSN Capitol Bureau takes a look at who's talking price hikes and who isn't.
All but one of the state universities are either lowering tuition and fees or raising them by less than 1%. The only exception, Wichita State.
Our online fee is going to be spread out among all the students across campus as opposed to just being charged to online students.
That's a $200 per semester increase for the average Kansas student.
Because of the changes that we've had to make because of the pandemic, many of the faculty have adjusted how they teach, and so they're using technology more. It doesn't mean that they're going to be teaching entirely remotely or online, but they may be using more technology tools in person kinds of class activities.
For K-State, KU, Emporia State, Fort Hays State, and Pittsburgh State, tuition and fees aren't changing that much.
Making sure that higher education is accessible to Kansans is incredibly important.
This is the third straight year there's been a push to keep the cost of Kansas colleges from spiking. The biggest change, though, comes with Emporia State. The university is deciding to drop out-of-state tuition by more than $3,000 a semester.
We sometimes look at out-of-state tuition as the ratio compared to in-state, and we were just a little high, we thought, and so this will be helpful, I believe.
The change would put Emporia State as the cheapest state university for out-of-state students. It's already second cheapest for in-state tuition behind Fort Hays State. Keep in mind these are all just proposals right now. In order for them to take effect, they have to be approved by the State Board of Regents next month. Reporting at the Capitol, I'm Alec Gartner.
So I'm going to start with any surprises there after you guys have been looking at the state budgets for the last several months. Any surprises at those proposals?
No, I'd say that's fairly consistent. As we talked about different things with higher ed, and there were some additional dollars that were added. At the end of the session, there were some issues with the maintenance of effort that was required by the federal level, which brought some additional dollars in from the state. Exactly how much we get from the federal dollars and what comes in out of the 1.9 trillion relief package is all part of what everybody's trying to work through. And I think President Garrett, we've got a number of great people in higher education, but continuing to focus on what is our primary mission, what do we accomplish with higher ed, what are those inputs to get the education that we want, has to be a priority. And that may mean not doing some of the things that we're doing. Those are hard decisions, but an important part of it. And I think that's where the Board of Regents will continue to lead our institutions as they work through those challenges. It's hard for an institution to say, no, we're not going to do that. But I think the board can help us where we make those decisions. But again, as President Garrett said, the access for the students is critical. And that's why I think folks kept a focus on keeping tuition and fees as low as they were able.
Wow. Yeah, I know that's been an issue nationwide, is the cost of a college education these days, and really, whether it's college or vocational training, there are very few jobs left that you can get with just a high school diploma these days.
I take a little bit different attitude, and in that, yes, they did a good job of trying to control the increases, but I and other legislators are saying we have reached a point where we're not going to be putting in regular increases into the region system. And because the feds required the maintenance of effort, the $53 million, that's why that money went in. But there is a growing concern that we need to make them more efficient. Maybe it is by controlling the programs, and the regents need to step up and do that. But the legislature, if you look historically, has decided to put less and less money, and we need to look at how to get more efficiency out of the regions.
And it's interesting you say that because I have, since coming to Kansas in 2001, seen as the legislature has put less and less money into the collegiate experience, and correspondingly, that hasn't led to less spending, it's just led to higher price bills for Kansas students, from what I've seen.
I totally agree, and I think there's more and more frustration out there. And if you look at some of the studies that have been done or articles that were written across the country, they see more and more universities and private colleges closing because they can't afford the increases that are out there. No. They have to look for a new model. And right now, even though we were promised a new plan for the region's institutions, we haven't seen one.
Yeah. Thoughts?
I'd agree. It may have been a different take, but I think it was a different take on the same opinion in terms of how we might work to get to efficiencies. So I appreciate Representative Helgerson's thoughts.
Well, while you guys are on opposite sides of the aisle, you do serve on many of the same committees and see a lot of the same information, so probably not too surprising there.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the big fights that we'll see this next year will be over redistricting. 10 years ago, it took so long to come up with a new breakdown of who should represent whom. Some lawmakers almost missed the deadline to run for office. Already, discussions are underway on how to handle redistricting this year. The first detailed population numbers from this year's national census aren't set to arrive until September. Lawmakers tasked with organizing the redistricting process are now wondering if they should begin holding town hall meetings to get public input before they've got those numbers in hand. 10 years ago, they had those numbers by July, but census delays mean they won't have access to those reports this summer. House Majority Leader Representative Dan Hawkins told the Kansas Reflector, "I wonder if we wait until the end of September, if we even have enough time to do all the meetings." Others, like Senate Vice President Senator Rick Wilborn, worry holding the meetings without that information could be a mistake. Wilborn told the Reflector, "The concern with going early is we'll be confronted with a lot of questions and suggestions as it relates to the population changes. We won't have it before us, and we'll look almost inept going forward until we get that data." And there's a lot there, but really, I think the big question that everybody has is, are we in danger because of this delay of repeating that last-minute process from 2011? You guys have been around a while. Henry, why don't you start?
No, the Republicans are going to control everything, so they'll probably tell us this is the way it's going to be, unless some moderate Republicans decide to join with us and the governor vetoes something. I expect they're going to hand us what their maps are, and that'll be it.
Okay, Stephen?
So I think we can get there through the legislative process. So I'm not as fearful of what we faced in the 2011-2012 time frame in the timing in the session. But that is what I hear going on with the leaders saying, can we just get out and get the input that we need? It'll be tough to get it from September until December. And for everyone to feel like they had that, I would tend to side with the concept of saying, let's have the data, let's have a few things that we can start reacting to beyond the generalities of knowing that the shifts will go to the population centers.
Yes, I've spoken with Patrick Miller at KU, who kind of redistricting is one of his specialties, and he's talked about the various different possibilities out there. And I know in the last one, we ended up the courts getting involved to a certain extent. Not foreseeing that this year?
I don't think so. So again, when we didn't pass the maps in the legislature, then the courts stepped in and gave us the maps that we could operate from. So we'll have the entire session to work through that. I think we can get through it on the legislative side. Again, it's how do we make sure that all of the communities feel like they had some input. And it may be bigger issues on the congressional maps than the state legislative maps. I'm not sure. It's possible you could start getting some idea there. How do you shift more of the urban population into those rural districts?
Yeah, I know there's a lot of talk about trying to break up Sharice David's congressional district there in the Johnson County area.
Yeah, I think you're going to see fighting among Republicans trying to take over certain areas, and that'll be, if they don't get it done, it's just because there's some infighting either between the House, the Senate, and those in the Congress.
Yeah. What are going to be the biggest issues? We mentioned Sharice David's district. Any other issues that you think might come up?
I think the congressional ones will be the biggest challenge. After that, with the number of Senate and House districts that we have within the state, you start at the corners, and what happens, how do you draw all the fine lines in Wichita where it's populated? In my area, in the middle, you're going to get squished by the corners as it comes together, and exactly where that falls, we'll get it figured out.
An interesting trend, when I started in the 80s in the legislature, we had one Democrat from Johnson County. And now we have, 9, 10, 11, and we used to have 10 or 11 Democrats from Sedgwick County, and now we have 6 in the House. So there's been a real shift, and I don't know how that'll play out, but it may play out in some way that the Democrats in Kansas City, Johnson County, Kansas City, Wyandotte, are becoming more and more populous, and we're losing them everything. Well, Hutchinson is the farthest western representative. So.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting. And then, of course, there's the rural versus urban divide. I know that that's been a continuing issue as well. And you alleged to that, how to figure out how to break that up. A lot of concern, I know, amongst rural lawmakers of losing power because of the growth in urban areas.
And it is a concern for those of us in the rural areas, but the numbers are going to drive it. So we will have the numbers that result from that. Thankfully, on most of the issues that we've had, our urban counterparts really have worked to get educated on the rural issues and work with us for what works best for the state.
All right. Okay, we're going to leave that one there because I have a feeling we're going to be discussing redistricting for quite a while on this show. It's one of those topics that doesn't go away. Well, the next topic is a weighty issue for airlines and their passengers. The FAA considering weighing passengers before they board planes. KSN's Jessica Watson explains why.
I think it could be offensive to people.
Slippery slope. I mean, it's going to get pushed back, I'm sure.
Sandy Hammond and her husband John were a little surprised to hear that airlines might weigh some passengers. They say it could lead to additional fees.
I can understand them wanting to know about the weight in the plane, but I think this is a beginning of them wanting to charge by pound.
Dr. Dean Headley has spent the last 31 years co-authoring airline quality ratings and says flyers should not take this personally.
It's not personal. Hopefully it will be a random selection And you can, I'm sure, be able to opt out and say, no, I don't think I want to participate.
Dr. Headley says it's important for airlines to have a good estimate of how much weight is on board.
Would you like to be on an airplane flying from Wichita to Cincinnati, and they get about halfway there and say, oops, we missed our weight and balance estimates, we're going to run out of fuel? Don't think people want to do that.
Extra pounds on Americans means more weight on planes. Dr. Headley says getting a better estimate will make flights safer.
FAA has a safety responsibility, and this is part of that safety responsibility to say, are we calculating accurately what our new weight gain is?
Jessica Watson, KSN News 3.
I think everybody I've talked to about this issue has brought up that fear of airlines starting to charge for your tickets by the pound. You know, as we look at this, there's long been talk of a passenger's bill of rights and trying to pass something like that. Obviously a federal issue, but you guys are still involved in lawmaking. Do you see kind of the attitude toward that changing at this point, especially if something like weighing passengers comes into play?
It would seem to, we need real clarity on the purpose for that. If we understand it, it's possible that we could get there, but what do we need that for? And Dr. Headley and others know far more than I do on the issue, but if it's for safety, what's the change that we're seeing on safety from operating, I think, fairly safely for several years with the margin that's there? Is it for efficiency that I can be more accurate with fuel, which is a real cost, and help save everyone money through efficiency? If I can see a clear path to that with a purpose, I think I'm more willing to participate in that. The ability to opt out is good, but if the need is for an accurate sample, that starts to make that more of a challenge. So again, we need more information on why are we doing it and what will we gain, and then I think we might be willing to consider it. But short of that, it's harder to say, oh, this sounds like a great idea.
It does kind of feel like somebody's floating a balloon at this point just to see how it goes with the public.
Yeah, I think they're floating a balloon, and I'm just waiting for them to take the congressional delegation and start asking them for their weights first.
Wonder how many congressmen and congresswomen will opt out of that one.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Well, thank you both so much for joining me, and I've enjoyed our discussion today. I hope you guys have as well. And we'd also like to thank our news partners at the Wichita Eagle, KSN News, and Cake News for sharing their materials with us. We hope you've enjoyed today's discussion and would love to continue it on social media. Just look for Pilar Pedraza TV or PBS Kansas on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. For now, stay safe and have a great week.